Imagine finding a phone that could see tomorrow before it happened. For Zainab, a poor girl surviving the chaos of Lagos, it began with a single headline glowing on a cracked screen: "Rainstorm hits Oshodi tomorrow." And when the skies opened the very next day, she realized this device wasn't just a phone, it was a key to the future. But in a world where tomorrow means power, a billionaire whose empire thrives on prediction would do anything to take it from her. Would you protect such a gift, or surrender it to survive? Stay with me, because this story will take you from dusty markets to glass towers, from hunger to heartbreak, and to a choice that could change the future forever. The noise of Oshodi market was deafening that afternoon, the kind of chaos only Lagos could produce. Hawkers shouted over each other, their voices competing with the blaring horns of Danfo buses. Generators coughed in the distance, filling the air with smoke. The sun blazed hot and merciless, pressing on the heads of traders and customers alike. Zainab Adeyemi, only 22, moved quietly through the crowd, her body thin from years of hunger, her slippers worn to the point of breaking. She had one mission: to find enough food to keep her younger brother, Musa, alive for another day. Hunger had sharpened her into someone both fragile and fierce, her cheekbones sharp beneath her dark skin, her almond-shaped eyes restless, scanning for bargains, survival in motion. She knew every corner of this market, every stall where a kind trader might shave a little price off. It was there, between a pile of fake designer belts and a stall selling second-hand clothes, that she saw it. At first, she thought it was trash. Lagos streets were littered with broken dreams, cracked phones, torn wrappers, abandoned sandals. But this one glowed. Half buried in dust, the phone's screen shone as if calling her name. She bent down, brushing sand away with trembling fingers. The device was old, the glass fractured, its edges dented as though it had been thrown away in anger. Yet the screen was alive, bright against the dirt, and on it, words scrolled across the display. "Rainstorm floods Oshodi market tomorrow." Zainab frowned. She glanced upward. The sky above was cloudless, blazing blue. The air smelled of dust and diesel, not rain. "Another broken app," she muttered, slipping it into her nylon bag. That night, back in their one-room shack patched with zinc and cardboard, Zainab lay awake. Musa slept beside her on the mat, his stomach growling even in his dreams. She couldn't stop staring at the phone. Its cracked screen glowed faintly in the dark, casting an eerie light on the room. Morning came, and with it, the storm. It began as a low rumble, distant but heavy. Then the skies cracked open, releasing sheets of rain that battered Oshodi like punishment from the heavens. Stalls collapsed under the weight of water. Traders screamed as their goods floated away. Danfo buses stalled in flooded streets. Within an hour, the market was a river. Zainab sat frozen by the shack's window, clutching the phone in shock. The headline had been true. That evening, another message appeared on the glowing screen: "Price of rice rises tomorrow, shortage expected." Zainab scoffed. Every day there's shortage. But still, she listened to the voice in her gut. With the last of her money, she bought a small bag of rice that night. By noon the next day, the price had doubled. For the first time in weeks, she and Musa ate hot rice, steam filling their shack like a miracle. Her hands shook as she ate, realization dawning: this phone could see tomorrow. Day after day, new headlines appeared. Fuel queues stretch longer tomorrow. Container accident kills traders tomorrow. Bread price falls tomorrow. Every word came true. At first, Zainab used it only for survival. She learned which stalls to visit early, which goods would run out, when to buy cheap. Soon, people noticed. "That girl always knows," they whispered in the market. Zainab ignored them, clutching her secret tightly. But Musa noticed. One night, as they sat by candlelight, eating beans she had bought cheaply before the market shortage, he asked quietly, "Z, how do you always know? Every day, you're right. What are you hiding?" Zainab hesitated, then slowly pulled out the cracked phone. She showed him the glowing screen, the words scrolling across. Musa's eyes widened in fear. "This is dangerous," he whispered. "Lagos doesn't forgive people who know too much. Don't let anyone see it." She forced a laugh. "It's only helping us survive. That's all I want." But his words lingered. Then, one night, everything changed. The phone buzzed harder than ever before. Zainab lifted it from under her wrapper, heart racing. A new headline glowed across the cracked glass: "Oba Oke Group billionaire loses billions overnight." Zainab's breath caught. She had heard the name Kenechukwu Oba Oke, one of the richest men in Nigeria. His empire controlled banks, oil, and tech. She had seen his face on TV, a man in fine suits, standing in glass towers she could never enter. But why was his name on her phone? Musa stirred. What does it say? She swallowed and lied. Nothing important. Just news. She hid the phone quickly. Later that night, as they walked back from the market, Zainab noticed it. A black SUV parked at the end of their street, its engine humming, windows tinted too dark to see inside. Her grip on the phone tightened. Musa whispered, his voice trembling. Z, why are they watching us? The SUV headlights flicked on, bright and blinding, sweeping across their tiny shack like a predator's gaze. Zainab's stomach twisted as the phone buzzed again in her pocket. She pulled it out, eyes widening at the glowing words. Tomorrow, you will be taken. Kenechukwu Oba Oke was a man Lagos had built into legend. At 40, he was both feared and admired, a billionaire whose name hovered in hushed conversations across banks, oil corporations, and political offices. He was the face of modern Nigerian wealth, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark skin polished like mahogany, his angular jawline always clean-shaven. He wore power the way others wore perfume, subtle yet suffocating. People said he could see the future. His empire thrived on prediction data, algorithms, market intelligence. Traders swore he could tell which stock would rise, which bank would fall. Politicians whispered that he knew election results before ballots were cast. But recently, his empire had faltered. The systems had failed, the machines that predicted markets for him, the codes and algorithms he trusted like loyal generals, had gone blind. And Oba Oke hated blindness. That was when he heard the rumor. From boardrooms to back alleys, the whispers spread. There was a girl in Oshodi, a poor nobody, who could tell tomorrow before it came. She knew when rice would rise, when fuel queues would stretch, when rains would flood the streets. It sounded like myth until one of his analysts brought him evidence. A grainy market video. The girl was small, thin, her face sharp with hunger yet lit with something fiercer. She had told traders to stock Gary before a price surge. Hours later, the surge happened. Oba Oke replayed the clip in his glass-walled office, eyes narrowing. Find her, he said coldly. Within days, 2 black SUVs rolled through Oshodi's crowded streets, their tinted windows reflecting frightened faces. Men in plain suits slipped into corners, asking questions too quietly to be ignored. Who was this girl? Where did she live? How did she always know? Zainab noticed first in her brother's eyes. Musa had grown up in poverty, but fear was new to him. Each time the SUVs appeared, his body stiffened. When neighbors whispered about strangers asking her name, his voice cracked. Z, they are looking for you. Zainab tried to laugh it off, but inside, her heart thundered. Each time she held the cracked phone, it felt heavier, as though it carried not just tomorrow but danger itself. She wanted to hide, to vanish into the noise of Lagos. But hunger pushed her forward. One morning, she tested her power. At the market, she whispered to a few women that beans would be scarce tomorrow. They looked at her suspiciously, but when the shortage hit the next day, their eyes widened with awe. Another day, she warned a young trader that a container would tip near his stall. He moved his goods. By noon, the accident happened. The whispers grew louder. That girl, she knows. Children followed her in the market. Women asked her quietly for guidance. Some called her a prophetess, others, a witch. In Lagos, being noticed was as dangerous as being invisible. The black SUV never left. It lingered at the edges of her life, headlights sweeping her shack at night. Neighbors avoided her, afraid of being associated. Poverty had always made her small, but now power made her visible, too visible. Musa begged her to stop. Z, they are watching. This is no blessing, it's a trap. But Zainab clenched her jaw. I will not let us starve. If tomorrow is all I have, I will use it. That night, as the candlelight flickered weakly in their one-room shack, Zainab sat staring at the phone. The screen glowed faintly, cracked glass reflecting her tired face. She wondered about the man behind the SUV. She had never seen him, but she felt his shadow pressing closer every day. Then the phone buzzed, harder than usual, like a heartbeat. She swallowed, hands shaking as she lifted it. The headline scrolled slowly across the cracked screen, words that froze her blood. Tomorrow, you will be taken. Her breath caught. The tiny shack seemed to shrink around her. Musa stirred in his sleep, unaware of the prophecy glowing inches from his sister's trembling hand. Zainab closed her eyes. For the first time, the gift of tomorrow felt less like survival and more like a curse. And somewhere, in a glass tower high above Victoria Island, Kenechukwu Oba Oke stood at his window, watching the Lagos skyline, already certain that the girl who saw tomorrow would soon belong to him. Zainab clutched the phone against her chest, heart pounding, as the hum of the black SUV returned outside her street. Tomorrow had arrived early. The words would not leave her. Tomorrow, you will be taken. Zainab sat cross-legged on the mat in their one-room shack, the cracked phone glowing in her trembling hands. The candle burned low, casting long shadows on the zinc walls patched with cardboard. Musa snored lightly beside her, his small frame curled like a question mark. She envied his innocence, his ability to sleep through storms of hunger and fear. But tonight, no sleep would come for her. Her heart raced as if it already knew the prophecy was true. She debated running, disappearing into Lagos before dawn, vanishing into another slum where no SUV could find her. But where would she go? Every street was a reminder of her poverty, every corner already mapped by eyes that watched too closely. She had no relatives left, no safe houses, no future but this one. By morning, she could not keep the secret any longer. Musa found her sitting in silence, the phone clutched to her chest. His eyes narrowed with worry. Z. She hesitated, then whispered, "It said they will take me. Tomorrow." The boy's face hardened. Hunger had stolen his childhood, but fear aged him even faster. "I told you, this thing is not a gift, it's a curse. Throw it away, Z, before it kills us both." But Zainab could not. She hid the phone in an old tin box beneath their mat, hoping darkness would smother its power. Yet that night, even through the tin, the glow leaked. Headlines flickered faintly, unstoppable, like tomorrow itself, insisting on being heard. The predictions grew louder, heavier. Fire guts a bakery in Agag tomorrow. The next day, smoke rose over Agag exactly as described. Danfo crash kills 4 tomorrow. Hours later, the news spread. Every line became reality, each truth a weight pressing her deeper into fear. One afternoon, desperate to make sense of it, she told a few trusted traders in the market about a coming shortage of beans. They laughed nervously but stocked their stalls anyway. When the shortage hit, their goods sold out in minutes. Grateful, one woman recorded her on a cheap phone camera, saying, "This girl knows things, she warned us." The video spread like wildfire through WhatsApp groups and Twitter feeds. A girl in Oshodi who knew tomorrow. By the end of the week, her face was everywhere. Men whispered when she passed. Women pressed her for advice. Some bowed their heads, calling her seer. Others spat and muttered, "Witch." In Victoria Island, in the high-rise headquarters of Oba Oke Group, the video reached the boardroom. Executives gathered around a massive screen, watching Zainab's thin frame and sharp eyes as she spoke with eerie certainty. "Market stock will vanish tomorrow," she said in the clip, and she had been right. The room fell silent. Finally, Kenechukwu Oba Oke's deep voice cut through. "Find her, at any cost." Back in Oshodi, Zainab tried to ignore the stares, tried to remain invisible in a city where invisibility was already impossible. She used the phone to buy food in bulk: rice, beans, palm oil before prices rose. For the first time in her life, Musa ate until he was full. She watched him lick his plate clean, joy lighting his face, and she told herself the risk was worth it. But the phone was not done with her. That night, as she washed plates outside the shack, it buzzed again. She pulled it out with tired hands, expecting another market tip, another storm warning. Her blood ran cold. "Tomorrow, brother will vanish." She dropped the phone onto the dirt, clutching her chest as though the words had stabbed her. Musa heard her gasp and rushed out. "What is it?" he asked, eyes wide. She forced a smile, hiding the screen. "Nothing. Just another warning." She tried to laugh, but her throat closed. Sleep was impossible. She lay awake, eyes fixed on her brother's sleeping form, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest, the innocence of his dreams. Fear gnawed at her until her eyes burned. And then morning came. The shack was too quiet. No snoring, no coughing, no sound of Musa shifting on the mat. Zainab's heart stopped. She turned and saw only the empty bedding, the blanket crumpled, the space cold. "Musa?" she whispered, her voice breaking. She scrambled to her feet, calling his name, running outside barefoot into the narrow street. Children played, traders shouted, life bustled, But Musa was nowhere. Then, she froze. At the end of the street, the black SUV waited. Its tinted windows reflected her panicked face back at her. The engine purred like a predator, calm and patient. Zainab's hands shook as the phone buzzed again in her pocket, its cracked screen glowing with cruel finality. She read the headline and staggered back, her breath caught in her throat. Tomorrow, you will bargain your soul. Oshodi woke like it always did, loud, impatient, hungry, but for Zainab the world had stopped. Musa's mat was cold, his slippers missing, his name a knot in her throat that would not untie. She ran barefooted into the morning, dodging Danfo bumpers and water puddles, calling for him until her voice turned hoarse. Traders looked up, then looked away. The black SUV idled at the far end of the street like a patient animal that never needed to chase. She started at the fish stalls, breath in shards. Have you seen my brother? 16. Slim. Laughs. Too loud. A woman wrapped in Ankara adjusted her basin and shook her head. Two boys pushing a wheelbarrow shrugged, their eyes sliding toward the SUV and then back to the ground. Fear traveled faster than sympathy in Lagos. It braided lips shut. Zainab felt it tightening around the market like wire. Past the belt sellers and second-hand shirts, she slipped between tarpaulin awnings that still dripped last night's rain. Auntie Bisi. Please. She begged a vendor who once kept her change safe. Musa. Where? The woman's fingers trembled over a scale. Z, don't ask me. People are asking questions with no smiles. Her gaze flicked toward a man in a neat, forgettable suit, phone to his ear, face blank as paper. Zainab's skin prickled. The city had grown eyes that did not blink. She ran because standing still would mean thinking. But thinking crashed in anyway, memories spooling behind her ribs. Musa, at 5, chasing a kite made of nylon and broomsticks through a flooded street, laughing as if the water were a playground and not a warning. Their mother, soft-voiced and iron-backed, counting coins, stretching stew, swatting mosquitoes. Their father's shoes by the door the night before he never returned. Two children learning to listen to the stomach's grammar. Now, not later. Z. A neighboring tailor called gently. Drink water. She wanted to, but fear had turned her mouth to ash. At the bus stop, two men asked a conductor if he knew a girl who sees tomorrow. The conductor's grin died mid-joke. Zainab swallowed the urge to bolt. Running would paint a target around her, but standing felt like drowning. She pressed a palm to her chest and felt the phone pulse inside her blouse, hot, insistent, as if it possessed a heart. She ducked into an alley between stacked crates, pulled the device out, and thumbed the cracked glass so hard she feared it would cut her. The headline bar was empty for a breath, then another. Then, like a reluctant confession, letters crawled across the screen. Loading tomorrow, her tears threatened. Please, she whispered to an object that owed her nothing. Please, just Musa. The phone flickered, showed a bakery fire in a gag, a price spike in kerosene, a small election upset, noise, everything but him. She wiped the screen with the hem of her skirt and refreshed again, and again. The city roared behind her. Her hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. It buzzed, flashed, then steadied into words that punched the air from her lungs. Billionaire negotiates release of boy in exchange for device. Beneath it, a timestamp tomorrow, 11:00 a.m., and a location that was not a street but a name. Oba Oke Group. Her mouth tasted of metal. Leverage. Musa was leverage. She pressed her back to the crate stack and slid downward until the dirt met her. Rage arrived like heat, swelling her chest, quickening her breath, bright enough to set the tarpaulin roofs alight. But rage had never fed them. Rage had not paid rent. She closed her eyes and counted 1, 2, 3, trying to cool the fire before it burned her decisions to ash. She rose on unsteady legs, wiped her face, and stepped back into the market with a face she had learned from survival. Blank enough to pass, sharp enough to cut. The SUV's engine purred. A man leaned on its door, half-smile that meant nothing. She looked past him as if he were weather, then melted into the crowd. If they wanted her to bring the phone, she would bring herself first. She could not fight a billionaire in the street, but she might slip through his halls. The plan formed in pieces, stitched from a lifetime of resourcefulness. People with money did not see cleaners. Glass towers treated uniforms like wallpaper. Zainab found a laundry kiosk behind the market where corporates dropped shirts for pressing. The attendant knew her mother once, softened, and for 1,000 naira and a promise to return it, handed Zainab a navy jumpsuit, a headscarf, and a lanyard with a cracked plastic sleeve. "God cover you," the woman whispered, fear frosting every syllable. By dusk, Zainab had scrubbed her face, tied the scarf tight, and hidden the phone along her spine with cloth and tape. She studied herself in a warped metal sheet. A cleaner, yes, but the eyes gave her away. Alarm bells held inside brown. She practiced walking with weight without looking weighed down. The city lights blinked awake one by one as she joined the late workers on a bus headed for Victoria Island, hands gripping a rail so hard her knuckles ached. Oba Oke Group rose from the avenue like a judgment glass, steel, a lobby that smelled of polished wood and expensive flowers. People flowed through turnstiles with the dreamy confidence of those who belonged. Zainab waited near the service entrance, counting beats, watching who swiped, who waved, who tailgated. When a pair of cleaners returned from break, she fell into step, eyes down, lanyard lifted like a prayer. The guard looked once, then away. Invisible at last, she exhaled without showing it. Corridors hummed with chilled air and quiet power. She memorized the angles, left at the art that moved when you weren't looking, right at the wall of awards, past a glass cube where people argued in polite voices. The elevator for facilities dinged open. Inside, she kept her eyes on the floor numbers, counting, not breathing. 34, 35, 36. She stepped out into carpet so soft her cheap soles went silent. The night staff had thinned to a few silhouettes behind glass, blue screens, painting faces. She moved like a shadow, mop bucket rolling, every squeak a thunderclap in her ears. A security camera blinked red in the corner. She angled her headscarf to throw a shadow over her cheekbones. At the end of the hallway, a door of darker glass stood half ajar. Beyond it, a room opened like a view into another country, an office with a skyline for a wall, ocean stitched in black silk. The city glittering like a crown a giant had forgotten to wear. He stood there, hands in his pockets, back to the door, tall enough to make the windows feel smaller. The aura that had haunted rumors settled over the space, cold, exact, the temperature of decisions. His reflection layered itself over the city lights, and for a second, Zainab saw him doubled man and myth before her courage stepped forward without her permission. The bucket knocked the door. The sound was small, but in that hush it rang. He turned, face from magazines, eyes like unsheathed knives. Zainab's breath caught, then found itself. She lifted her chin just enough to keep from drowning. "I'm here for my brother," she said, voice low, steady, and completely hers. His gaze flicked to the lanyard, to the scarf, to the steady way she stood inside borrowed clothes, something like surprise, then calculation. He did not smile, he did not blink. The city glittered behind him like witnesses holding their tongues. Then, Kenechukwu Oba Oke replied, each word measured, "You already know the price." The billionaire's office was not an office. It was a throne room carved in glass and steel, 36 floors above the restless sprawl of Lagos. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Victoria Island, where the ocean shimmered like a sheet of black silk stitched with moonlight. Digital maps pulsed across one wall, showing currencies, commodities, and stock prices shifting in real time, each line rising and falling like a living thing. The hum of servers and the faint click of cooling fans filled the silence with tension. Kenechukwu Oba Oke stood at the center of it, his presence as sharp as the clean lines of his tailored suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark skin gleamed against the glow of screens. His angular face held no warmth, only the precision of a man who lived on control. When he turned, his eyes hard, deep, metallic cut, across the room and pinned Zainab where she stood. She felt her throat dry, but she did not look away. The mop bucket at her side was a disguise, nothing more. This was no longer a game of slipping through doors, this was war played on marble floors. "You've been very noisy for a girl from Oshodi," Oba Oke said, voice calm, smooth, but edged with authority. "Predictions that shake markets, traders whispering your name. You think I don't notice when someone plays with tomorrow?" Zainab swallowed, the cracked phone taped against her spine burning like fire. "Where is my brother?" He tilted his head, studying her as though she were data on one of his endless screens. "Safe, for now." "That depends on you." The truth sank like a stone in her stomach. He wasn't denying it. He had Musa. Her fists clenched. "You kidnapped him." "I retrieved leverage," he corrected coolly. "You carry something that doesn't belong to you. Give it to me, and the boy walks free." She felt the words crack through her chest like thunder. For a second, she wanted to break, to fall to her knees, to beg, to plead, but something hotter rose in her blood. Defiance. She lifted her chin. No. For the first time, surprise flickered in his steel eyes. No? This phone. She pressed a hand to her chest, over where it burned against her skin. It came to me. It's mine. My destiny. You already own towers, banks, ships, satellites. You want to own tomorrow too. I only want to survive today. The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Oba Oke studied her with new interest, his features tightening, then easing as though he were adjusting calculations in his head. So you know, he said slowly. About tomorrow. She froze. His tone was too certain, too knowing. You mean the headlines? His eyes narrowed. So it's true. Her blood ran cold. She had revealed too much. The air in the office thickened. But, instead of rage, he did something stranger, he laughed. Not loudly, not joyfully, but softly, almost bitterly. How many machines, how many men, how many billions I've poured into algorithms. And here you are, a girl in torn slippers holding what I've chased all my life. Zainab's chest tightened. I won't give it to you. Oba Oke stepped closer, his shadow long across the marble, his voice lowered, smooth as oil. You're young. You've known only hunger, dirt, fear. I can give you more than scraps, luxury, education, a house that breathes with light, protection from every shadow that stalks you, wealth beyond imagination, all for one cracked phone. The temptation pressed against her ribs like a hand. For a heartbeat, she saw it Musa in a real bed, her own sketches stitched into real clothes, food that never ran out. For the first time in her life, freedom from want. But she saw something else too. His eyes. Cold, hungry, unyielding. A man who would never stop wanting. Her lips curled bitterly. And then what? You sit in this glass cage and own tomorrow? Control lives like stock charts? No, I won't be your key. I won't sell tomorrow to you. The words hung between them like thunderclouds. For a moment, his jaw tightened, the steel in him threatening to break loose. But then, his voice softened. His gaze shifted, not just cold calculation, but something more complicated. Your mother, he said quietly. Zainab's breath caught. She once worked for me, not directly, but in a health project we funded in Akure. I remember her name. Strong woman, fierce eyes. You inherited them. His words were neither threat nor seduction, but revelation. Her knees weakened. She had never told anyone here about her mother. How did he know? Her mouth trembled. Why are you telling me this? Because, he said, his steel voice low. We are not so different, you and I. Hunger taught me to own the world before it owned me. It is teaching you too. The only question is whether you fight with me or against me. The phone buzzed violently against her spine. Her eyes widened. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The cracked screen glowed brighter than ever, letters crawling across like scars. Tomorrow, one of you will die. Her throat closed. She looked up, and Oba Oke's eyes were already on the screen. His face did not flinch, but his jaw clenched. For the first time, Billionaire and Market Girl stood not as hunter and prey, but as two souls staring at the same terrifying future. The phone's glow lit their faces in the darkened office, its prophecy cutting through the silence. Tomorrow. Death was waiting, but for whom? They didn't put her in a cell. They put her in a view. Morning poured over Victoria Island like melted gold, and Zainab watched it from behind glass that climbed into the sky. Guards didn't touch her. Doors opened when she approached, closed when she passed, and a receptionist who never blinked offered water with a smile that was trained, not kind. Locked, yes, but inside a cathedral of money, where silence was curated and even the air felt paid for. Negotiations had stalled. She would not surrender the phone. He would not release Musa without it. So the tower kept her guest, prisoner, problem, while Oba Oke moved through floors like weather, appearing and vanishing, a thunderhead disguised in linen and steel. From a quiet mezzanine overlooking the operations floor, she studied him within the ecosystem he had built. Servers blinking in blue pulses, analysts murmuring over spiking graphs, maps of supply routes spidering across screens. This was what power looked like when it wasn't shouting. It was numbers breathing. He studied her back, sometimes openly, more often in the reflections thrown by glass. Her spine stayed straight, chin lifted even when fear tried to bend her. He, recognized the stiffness had worn it himself once in Enugu, a boy whose ribs remembered famine, who learned to file pain into silence and sell the silence for a future. Watching her stirred an ache he had trained into obedience. They clashed in rooms built for calm. "You hold a city hostage," she said, fingers gripping the edge of a conference table too glossy to bruise. "You call it risk management. I call it fear." He didn't raise his voice. "You carry a weapon you don't understand," he replied. "You call it destiny. I call it volatility." Their words were knives wrapped in velvet. When they cut, neither bled where the other could see. But the tower was not immune to her. One afternoon, a logistics manager fretted over cold chain timing for a northern route. A minor delay could spoil crates of produce. Zainab, standing invisible at a glass wall, felt the phone heat against her back, then cool, as if breathing. She pulled it out beneath her scarf, eyes flashing across a modest line. "Storm front reaches Kaduna tomorrow afternoon, temperature dip late morning." She stepped forward before fear could stop her. "Leave by 4 a.m., not 6, she said. "You'll beat the front and load under cooler air." The manager bristled, then tried it. 2 days later, waste dropped, margins rose, and a rumor moved floor to floor. The girl from Oshodi had saved a shipment with a sentence. Respect came quietly here, like good coffee, no perfume, just aroma. Analysts began to greet her with nods. A woman from compliance left a meat pie on her desk and pretended she hadn't. Even Kehinde, a sharp-eyed engineer who wore headphones like armor, asked, "How did you know that timing?" She held his gaze. "I'm learning to listen when tomorrow whispers." Arguments with Oba Oke softened at the edges without losing sharpness. He began offering context before demands, stories before threats. "I built this tower because no one ever saved me," he said one evening, standing at the window where Lagos bled into sea. "Prediction was my revenge on chaos." She joined him at the glass, breath fogging a ghost print. "Prediction is not compassion," she answered. "You can know a flood is coming and still refuse to open your gates." He turned to face her. "I did open them. That is why you're standing here." Their eyes held. The room changed temperature. For a suspended second, they were not billionaire and girl, captor and captive, but two people inside the same weather, trying to decide if the lightning between them would cauterize or burn. She looked away first, because looking longer felt like falling. On the 18th floor, a security bay looped silent camera feeds across a wall. Zainab drifted in under the pretense of seeking a bathroom. The guard barely looked up. On a lower corner screen, a small apartment flickered mattress, locked door, plastic chair. Musa sat with his chin on his knees, alive and restless, watched by two men with the boredom of paid patience. She bit the inside of her cheek until iron filled her mouth. Relief and rage arrived together and refused to make room. Back at the operations floor, she tested the phone in small ways. She predicted a diesel delivery delay that never made the news. Hoses and schedules shifted, and a warehouse stayed cold. She warned a mid-level trader not to short a commodity that everyone expected to sink. It rose on an obscure policy change she alone had seen hinted in tomorrow's line. Each success lured her deeper into a dangerous truth. She could turn this place with a fingertip, like a child spinning a globe. One evening, the phone brightened without buzzing, a soft lantern in her palm. No catastrophe, no prices, no storms, only a single line that seemed to watch her reading it. The girl and the billionaire must stand together or fall apart. She read it 3 times. The phrasing irritated her, girl and billionaire, as if she were not a person with a name. The meaning terrified her. Together how? Against what? She wanted to throw the device into the ocean, then dive after it. She found him in a side lounge where the city's noise died at the threshold. He was shrugging off his jacket, tie already undone, the uniform loosened, but the command still in his shoulders. "We can't be on the same side," she said without preamble, holding the phone like indictment. "Our sides are the problem." He studied the line, face unreadable, then exhaled a humorless breath. "Fate is a lazy negotiator," he murmured. "It prefers binaries." He looked up. "I prefer deals." "What deal frees Musa without selling my soul?" she asked. "The one where we stop pretending your phone is only a lottery ticket," he said. "It's a weapon. Aim it with me instead of at me." "My life is not your range," she snapped. "Then pick a target," he returned. The lights overhead flickered. Once. Twice. She frowned. He stilled, head tilting fractionally, as if he could hear electricity think. Somewhere far below, a generator coughed. A corridor monitor stuttered maps, freezing, then lurching. Alarms were well trained here. They rarely screamed. Tonight, they decided to learn. A siren split the floor, thin at first, then fat with urgency. Screens went black in a wave that moved like night across water. Doors sealed with a mechanical sigh. The lobby lights died. Emergency strips lit the baseboards in sallow lines. Voices rose, then sharpened into discipline. Power redundancy failed. Switch to tertiary. Why is tertiary dark? Cyber or grid? Find the origin. Zainab's phone flared white-hot in her hand, then cooled to a deep, unsettling calm. A line appeared across the glass, small and cruel in its certainty. Blackout begins here. She looked up into Oba Oke's face and saw, for the first time, something close to nakedness. Not fear, calculation stripped of armor. He was measuring a void. "Stay with me," he said, voice low and even, as if volume could keep panic from breeding. The floor under them hummed with a different kind of power, human, urgent, fallible. Somewhere in the tower, a door thudded the way a heart does when it misses a beat and tries to make it up with another. The second siren arrived with teeth. Lights died completely. The city vanished behind glass. For one impossible moment, Lagos itself seemed to blink and refuse to open its eyes. The tower had never been this dark. Screens that once pulsed with light and data now hung black and lifeless, reflecting only the pale glow of emergency strips along the floor. The air hummed with the panic of people trying to look calm. Footsteps thundered where silence usually reigned. For a man who had built an empire on control, the blackout was not just an inconvenience, it was treason. Oba Oke stood in the middle of the chaos, his jaw locked tight, his body still as stone, while analysts scrambled, shouted, and failed. For the first time, Zainab saw not a billionaire carved from marble but a man cornered, fury trembling beneath his stillness. His empire had been hacked. She could see it in the way his eyes darted to dead servers, to locked doors that refused to open. "This isn't grid failure," he growled, voice low. "Dangerous. Someone is inside my system." Zainab's stomach turned. Another force wanted the phone. Not hunger, not survival ambition. Rivals. The thought of being caught between men who would kill for her tomorrow left her dizzy. She clutched the phone, feeling its weight like a brand against her skin. Through the emergency-lit gloom, Ifeoma entered the room. She was tall, statuesque, her fitted navy suit cutting sharp lines against her smooth bronze skin. At 35, she carried the composure of a woman who had spent her life mastering boardrooms where men assumed ownership. Her pearl earrings caught what little light remained, gleaming like warning bells. "We have to contain this," she announced, her voice firm, clipped. "The system breach is spreading across subsidiaries. Whoever is doing this wants destabilization, and they know about her." Her eyes cut toward Zainab like knives. Zainab stiffened, bracing for judgment. Ifeoma's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. "She's the liability. Hand her over. That's what they're after." The words struck like stones. Rage surged in Zainab's chest. She stepped forward, her almond eyes flashing, her voice trembling but sharp. "So you'd throw me to wolves? You think selling me fixes your empire? Or maybe—" She leaned closer, defiance radiating. "Maybe you are the wolves." Ifeoma laughed lightly, tilting her head as if appraising a child playing dress-up. "You mistake yourself, little girl. You're not a queen. You're a street rat who got lucky. This tower, this man, this war, you don't belong in any of it. And when men like us fight, the market eats people like you first." Heat flamed in Zainab's cheeks, but before she could snap back, Oba Oke's voice sliced through the tension. "Enough." Both women turned. He had stepped closer, his presence filling the room, his shadow long against the glass. His steel eyes locked on Ifeoma. "We don't hand her over." The room stilled. Even in the half-dark, Zainab saw the flicker of shock ripple across faces. Ifeoma's jaw tightened. "Kenechukwu, I am thinking," he cut her off, his tone sharp enough to wound. "She is not the weakness. She is the only one in this tower who has been right about tomorrow." The silence that followed carried weight. Respect, confusion, suspicion. But to Zainab, it was a revelation this man who had threatened her, trapped her, held her brother, was defending her now. Then the building shook. Somewhere below, a heavy door slammed open. Shouts echoed up the pawn. Stairwell men's voices, urgent, armed. Oba Oke turned instantly, all cold fury transmuted into survival. "We're moving. Now." Without waiting for agreement, He grabbed Zainab's arm, not possessive, but protective, and pulled her into the corridor. Ifeoma followed reluctantly, her heels clicking against marble as the three of them ducked into a stairwell lit only by flickering strips. "Attackers inside?" Zainab whispered, her voice small. "Not attackers," Oba Oke muttered, eyes scanning the shadows, jaw tense. "Insiders." The descent was frantic. 3 floors. 4. 5. Twice, security doors refused to open, overridden by whoever had breached the system. Once, they ducked behind a pillar as 2 masked men stormed past with rifles, their radios crackling with codes. Zainab's lungs burned. Sweat trickled down her back. And yet, in the frantic rush, she kept stealing glances at him. The billionaire, who had once seemed untouchable, now had sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled, fury burning raw across his face. He moved with precision, shielding her with his body, calculating routes with instinct. He was still dangerous, still cold, but also achingly human. At the base of another stairwell, alarms screamed overhead, deafening now, red strobes painting walls. Ifeoma cursed under her breath. "We can't hold this building." Oba Oke's grip tightened on Zainab's hand, guiding her toward a service tunnel. "Then we don't. We take her, and we leave." Zainab stumbled after him, her heart a war of contradictions. He was her captor. He was her shield. He was the man who held her brother's fate, and now, the man dragging her through shadows to save her from enemies she had never seen. Her chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers. Instead, she clutched the phone harder, its glow hidden under her scarf. And then it buzzed. Mid-escape, mid-flight, mid-breath. The cracked glass lit up with a headline that made her knees weaken. "Tomorrow, Lagos will burn." Her breath caught. The noise of alarms faded beneath the weight of those 4 words. She lifted her eyes to Oba Oke. He saw it in her face before she even showed him. His jaw tightened, his steps slowed, but he said nothing, because sometimes silence was heavier than prophecy. As they pushed through the service tunnel into the night air, the phone's glow pulsed like a heartbeat, whispering the doom of a city too vast to save. The phone did not buzz this time. It roared. In Zainab's palm, the cracked glass lit so bright it painted her face with a ghostly sheen, and then, without prompt, it played what she had never seen before. Not a headline, but moving images. Riots. Flames devouring market stalls, tires burning black smoke into the sky, crowds shoving, shouting, scattering under the glare of police lights, Lagos itself on fire. Zainab staggered back, the reflection of the blaze searing her eyes. "It's not just words anymore," she whispered. "It's showing me tomorrow." Oba Oke leaned over her shoulder, his tall frame casting her in shadow. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing as the phone replayed chaos on loop. "If this gets out," he muttered, "panic will burn the city before the fire does." Zainab rounded on him, her chest heaving. "So you'll bury it? Hide it until Lagos drowns in smoke? Don't you see? We can save people." His voice cut sharp. "Do you know what happens when you scream fire in a crowded city of 20 million? Stampedes. Looting. Collapse. You cannot warn Lagos without destroying it." Their voices collided in the narrow tunnel they had fled through. Logic against compassion, control against humanity. Her words carried raw urgency, his, the cold weight of experience. For the first time since meeting him, she realized they were both right and both wrong. By dawn, they slipped out of the tower's shadow into Lagos streets wearing borrowed clothes. Her in a simple taif, wrapper and headscarf. Him in a plain shirt that could not disguise his stature. The city did not know they were fugitives. Not yet. But tension brewed in the air like thick smoke. They saw it first at Yaba Market. Traders haggled louder, fiercer. 2 men nearly came to blows over rice prices. A crowd clustered around a shouting preacher, his words sparking like dry tinder. "The government is lying. Tomorrow will reveal the truth." The electricity in people's eyes told Zainab the prophecy had already begun to leak, though no one could name its source. When smoke curled above a row of wooden stalls, her blood froze. There by the palm oil sellers, they ran. A small stove had tipped, fire licking through plastic containers of kerosene. In seconds, the blaze spread. People screamed, buckets clattered, goods toppled. Without thinking, Zainab pushed through the chaos, her scarf slipping. "Move the sacks," she shouted, dragging 2 children away. "Water, now!" Her voice, sharp and certain, sliced through panic. Dozens followed her lead. Buckets arrived. Flames hissed, the fire smothered before it became a tragedy. Traders panted, sweat streaming, goods charred but lives intact. And then eyes turned to her. "It's her," one woman whispered, clutching her chest. "The girl who knows. She saw it before it happened." Another muttered, "God is using her." Phones lifted. Faces pressed closer. Hands reached out to touch her as though she carried holiness. "Tell us tomorrow," they cried. "Prophetess, tell us what to buy, where to run." Zainab stumbled back, overwhelmed by hands, voices, reverence, fear, knotted with awe in her chest. She wanted to scream she was no prophetess, just a girl who found a broken phone, but their eyes drank her as truth. From the edge of the crowd, Oba Oke watched, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But inside, he was shaken. He had built an empire on numbers, on systems that made men kneel. Yet this girl, with nothing but hunger and a cracked device, commanded the devotion of a crowd. Influence, real, raw influence. It terrified him more than fire. And in the shadows of another street, Ifeoma watched too. Her pearl earrings caught the light as she whispered to an aide, "Look at her. Lagos already bows. But power like hers, it will turn against him. We just need to give it a push." Her smile was as sharp as the blaze Zainab had extinguished. That night, back in a safe house tucked behind unmarked gates, Zainab sat trembling. The phone lay on the table, buzzing violently as if straining under its own knowledge. She hesitated before picking it up, dread crawling through her bones. The glass flickered, cracked light trembling, and then words appeared with brutal finality. "Tomorrow, Zainab will betray him." Her hand shook, her heart slammed. She stared across the dim room at Oba Oke, seated with his shirt sleeves rolled, head bowed over maps and notes. He looked up, eyes catching hers with that unreadable steel. She dropped the phone, breath ragged. For the first time, the prophecy had turned its gaze directly on her, not as savior, not as witness, but as traitor. It is one thing to fear tomorrow. It is another to read your own name there, branded with treachery. Tomorrow, Zainab will betray him. The words haunted the room even when the phone slept, even when she buried it in a drawer like a guilty thought. They were a stain she could not scrub from her mind. Every time Oba Oke looked at her, she wondered if he could see the headline flickering in her pupils. She followed him through days that felt like wire-tight, humming, liable to snap. He spoke in logistics and losses, in roots and risks, in the calculus of a city on edge. She answered in short sentences, conserving truth like water in harmattan. When he asked what the phone said, she offered only the pieces that saved lives and avoided panic. Omit enough and omission becomes a kind of lie. She felt it splinter under her skin. He noticed the distance and misread it. In his world, silence rarely meant fear. It meant leverage. He saw the way crowds leaned toward her at markets, how traders weighed her words like currency. Influence pooled at her feet, and he mistook it for greed rising. His mouth hardened more often. His questions came with invisible ledgers attached. "Who are you advising now? Who paid you to warn them? What do you want, Zainab?" "Want." The word startled her. It held dresses she had never owned, a kitchen with spice jars named for seasons instead of salaries, Musa sleeping without hunger beneath a roof that didn't leak. But the phone's sentence carved across each wanting, a knife that split desire from safety. Tomorrow, Zainab will betray him, if only betrayal were a choice. If only prophecy did not feel like a hand at her back. Musa returned with no ceremony and fewer answers. One afternoon the safe house door opened and there he stood, thin but unbroken between two impassive men. Zainab ran to him so fast the room shifted. His arms wound around her neck, his laugh a tattered kite finally catching wind. "I told them I'm not leaving you," he said later, chin lifted with stubborn loyalty as if it could be armor. "If they let me go, they let me go to us." She cried in a way she hadn't allowed herself to since childhood, quiet and total, her face buried in his shoulder. Gratitude dissolved into suspicion as quickly as rain on hot concrete. Why now? What bargain had been struck while she slept? Rivals had their own stories ready. The boardroom rumor mill spun with efficient malice. Anonymous emails claimed Zainab was feeding tips to competitors, that her prophecies were timed to sabotage logistics, that riots followed in the wake of her warnings. Screenshots, fake or real, circulated of supposed payments from shell companies with names chosen to sound invisible. Somebody packaged fear like a press, a release, and sent it floor to floor. She felt the eyes. The respectful nods turned brittle. Kehinde kept faith, but even he spoke softly, as if near a cliff. Adaku, reassigned from the car to the corridors as the tower shrank into a smaller war, whispered to Zainab in passing. Guard your heart, not just your back. It sounded like gospel and triage at once. At night, tension slowed into something treacherously tender. The city grew quiet in that way Lagos has of catching its breath between disasters, and they, Billionaire and girl, found themselves sharing the same balcony, the same stretch of stars. He told her about Enugu with fewer edges, a boy who learned to map scarcity, to turn hunger into straight lines and profit margins. How he slept easier in rooms that hummed with servers because silence still sounded like abandonment. She told him about rain through zinc, how she used to count seconds between lightning and thunder to measure distance the way other children measured affection. He listened to her with a care that made breathing feel more precise. She fought the part of herself that leaned into that listening like shade at noon. He invited her to sea on a night when the phone went silent, as if exhausted by its own visions. An hour, he said, to let the city shrink. The yacht moved like a polished whisper across black water. Lagos unwound behind them into a geography of light. Musa stood at the bow, grinning at his own reflection in the dark, a boy again. Below deck, a small dining table wore restraint. Grilled fish, plantain, a bottle of sparkling water with a foreign name that fizzed like laughter, refused too long. Wind pulled stray strands from Zainab's headscarf. She and Oba Oke stood side by side, elbows touching the cool rail, shoulder to shoulder as if the ocean were a wall they both leaned against. He turned slightly, his profile carved in moonlight, softer than steel, closer than myth. For a moment, shocking for gentleness, she imagined a life that did not require prophecy to protect it. His hand moved, not commanding, just close. The air took a different shape. The phone woke like a struck match. It pulsed in her pocket, a heartbeat too strong for her own. She stepped back as if burned and pulled it out. The screen, spidered with old fractures, glowed as if lit from under the world. Words scrolled slow, merciless. Not the old sentence, worse. Ensure survival. Betray him. She flinched. Betrayal was no longer a future to fear. It had become instruction. Behind her, the water licked at the hull with a sound like whispering crowds. He saw her face and misread it again, hurt blooming where desire had hovered. Who's paying you? He asked, the question a reflex sharpened by a million meetings. His voice was low, deadly, even when hushed. Tell me now. Paying me? She echoed, laughter cracking. I am paid in minutes where my brother is not taken, in nights when the roof doesn't leak, in food that doesn't require math. You think money is the only language for survival. He didn't step back, and he didn't step closer. His gaze carried the old steel again. You think survival excuses everything? He looked past her to where Musa leaned into wind, then back, something torn in his eyes. I can protect you, but not if your loyalty floats. Loyalty? The word tasted like iron. I'm standing on a boat owned by the man who locked my brother in a room to force my hand. If I'm a traitor, it was your cage that raised her. The water between them refroze. Whatever nearly thing had leaned into being retreated, wounded. By morning, Lagos had more fires than places to put them out. Not all were literal. Some were rumors burning through timelines, gorging on oxygen and outrage. Ifeoma fed them surgical lies with a saint's smile. She courted fearful shareholders and bruised department heads, threading prudence through her language. Like beads. She's brilliant, she conceded in side conversations that were somehow always overheard. But brilliance without allegiance is civil war. The board summoned an emergency session, not in the grand theater with views of the city too dramatic for those who pretended restraint, but in a cold room with a long table and the smell of old coffee. Screens lined one wall. Security stood at both ends. Zainab walked in beside Oba Oke, head high, hands empty. She felt Musa somewhere in the building like a pulse out of sync with her own. Faces weighted hunger in ties and perfume. Kehinde nodded once. Adaku stood like a quiet wall near the door. Ifeoma presided with the elegance of a verdict. She wore ivory today, a clean color for messy conclusions. Her pearl earrings flashed as she looked around the table, then settled her gaze on Zainab. Before we discuss numbers, she began, voice smooth enough to sell mercy, we must discuss risk. It has a name. She didn't look at Oba Oke. The cruelty was more refined than that. Zainab Adeyemi. A chart appeared on the screen behind her spikes and dips. Shipments lost and saved, rumors mapped against inventory loss. Correlation, she said, isn't causation, but when correlation breeds chaos, we call it sabotage. Zainab's mouth opened, then closed. Ifeoma's rhythm didn't leave spaces for truth to breathe. Payments from shell entities, she continued, tapping a tablet. On cue, screenshots blossomed emails with blurred headers, transfers that looked like money laundering to the untrained eye. Whose phone knows tomorrow? Hers. Who benefits when panic reshapes price? She does. A low ripple of outrage wet the room like rain that knows it will become a flood. Lies, Kehinde muttered, too soft for anyone to dignify with a turn of the head. Ifeoma stepped away from the table, closer now, her smile ablaze. Street girl playing queen, she said gently, as if the Milligans' kindness were in the cadence. Tell us, how much did tomorrow cost you to sell? The room tilted, murmurs becoming a verdict, while the phone in Zainab's pocket began to glow again, brighter than the boardroom lights, as if tomorrow itself demanded an answer. The rooftop was a stage, and Lagos played audience. From 36 floors up, the city glowed like a crown scattered in a river, traffic lights blinking, generators humming, night markets pulsing with noise. The air was thick with heat and tension, and at the center of it stood three figures locked in a triangle sharper than glass. Ifeoma's heels clicked against the concrete as she advanced, ivory suit sharp against the dark. Her pearl earrings flashed under rooftop floodlights, her posture regal, her voice slicing through the humid air. Kenechukwu, she said evenly. This charade ends tonight. Choose. Your empire or her. The words slammed into Zainab's chest like a fist. She felt every board member's whispers, every headline of betrayal, every shadow of prophecy pressing down at once. Her eyes burned. Her hands trembled as she pulled the cracked phone from her scarf, holding it out like a confession. Take it, she said, her voice breaking. Save yourself. Save your empire. If all this is because of me, end it. Just take it. Tears streaked her cheeks, hot against the night breeze. Her hand shook as she forced the phone toward him. Oba Oke looked at her, really looked, as though her face were the only data worth analyzing. His steel eyes softened, not with pity, but with something she had never seen from him before. Surrender. He pushed the phone back toward her chest, his voice low but steady. No, he said, you are the only truth left in my world. The words hit harder than any command, any threat he had ever given. Zainab's breath caught. The rooftop seemed to tilt, the city fading into a blur of light as the space between them pulled tight like a rope. For one suspended heartbeat, their foreheads nearly touched, their lips separated by a question neither dared to ask. Then the world broke. The crack of gunfire split the night. Concrete dust burst at their feet. Zainab gasped as Oba Oke shoved her behind him, his body a shield. From the opposite rooftops, red dots of sniper scopes danced like devils across the concrete. The night erupted with chaos shouts, shattering glass, guards scattering to respond. The phone slipped from her hand. Time slowed as it clattered across the concrete, screen cracking anew, spiderweb fractures glowing against the night. Zainab screamed, lunging, but Oba Oke's grip locked her in place. Stay down, he barked, his own chest rising and falling like a war drum. Bullets sparked against the ledge. He moved with the precision of survival, dragging her toward the helipad at the far end. Behind them, Ifeoma raised her voice above the chaos. This is what she brings you, she shouted, her words flung into the noise like knives. Fire, betrayal, ruin, she will cost you everything. Her words were drowned by the roar of rotor blades. A black helicopter descended onto the helipad, wind whipping Zainab's scarf from her head, the fabric sailing into the night like a surrender flag. She stumbled under the gale, clutching Oba Oke's arm as he pulled her forward. Snipers kept firing. Guards returned fire from the tower's edges. Sparks rained. Alarms wailed. The rooftop became a battlefield, the skyline their witness. Zainab pressed herself against him as they sprinted, his frame absorbing every ricochet, every risk. In that moment, she knew with bone-deep certainty, whatever else he was, tyrant, billionaire, manipulator, he was also her protector. The helicopter's door slid open. A guard inside reached out, pulling Musa first, his terrified face pale against the spinning night. Zainab's heart lurched as she saw her brother safe, his thin arms outstretched toward her. She stumbled into the cabin next, Oba Oke climbing in last, bullets still sparking off the helipad as the craft lifted into the night. Below, the rooftop shrank, a scatter of chaos swallowed by distance. Ifeoma's figure stood near the ledge, arms crossed, her ivory suit glowing faintly against the dark. Her face was unreadable, victory, fury, or something colder. Inside the helicopter, Zainab clutched her brother, sobbing into his shoulder as adrenaline finally spilled from her bones. Oba Oke sat across, breathing hard, his shirt torn where bullets had grazed concrete too close. Their eyes met across the cabin. No words passed, but the silence carried what the rooftop had nearly spoken. Then, the phone buzzed. Zainab pulled it from her pocket, her fingers trembling. The screen was fractured worse than ever, shards of glass threatening to cut her skin. Yet the glow still burned, brighter than before. She squinted through tears, reading the words as they scrolled slow and deliberate. Tomorrow, the end of the phone. Her hand froze. Musa leaned closer, confusion in his eyes. Oba Oke's gaze sharpened as he read it too, his jaw tightening. For all their fights, all their wars with words and silences, this was something neither had prepared for. If tomorrow promised the end of the phone, then tomorrow promised the end of the power that bound them, and the end of the reason enemies hunted them at all. As the helicopter rose higher, Lagos shrinking into a restless ocean of light below, Zainab clutched the glowing device against her chest, her heart pounding with the cruel certainty. Tomorrow, everything would break. The phone no longer obeyed. Its screen, once precise and merciless, now pulsed erratically, words twisting into broken fragments. One moment it read, "Tomorrow, Lagos burns," and the next, the letters scrambled into symbols she couldn't recognize. Sometimes, two headlines layered over each other until neither could be read. Zainab stared at the fractured screen as the helicopter cut across the night sky. She had trusted its certainty, even feared it, but now the cracks seemed to spread not just through glass but through destiny itself. "It's dying," she whispered. Oba Oke leaned forward, his steel eyes softer in the flickering light. "Not dying," he said. "Glitching. Machines don't die, they malfunction." But his words carried unease. He was a man who had built empires on algorithms and foresight. Yet he couldn't deny the phone had predicted more than any system he had owned. And now, its unraveling meant tomorrow was no longer a script but a gamble. Days later, under the heat of a rural sun, they drove through a dirt road lined with maize fields and mango trees. Zainab's headscarf clung to her damp skin, Musa dozing in the back seat with his head against her shoulder. Oba Oke drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, until the car slowed before a village nestled against low hills. "This is where she worked?" Zainab asked, her voice small. "Yes." His tone was quiet, reverent almost. "Your mother, years ago, our company funded a health tech pilot here, clinics with solar panels. A data program that monitored disease spread. She was one of the coordinators. Fierce, brilliant. I remembered her name when I saw you." Zainab's throat tightened. She remembered her mother's tired smile, the way she held her hand through nights of fever. To think their paths had crossed here before destiny twisted everything, it left her dizzy. They found the clinic, abandoned but still bearing the faded logo of Oba Oke Group. Dust coated the solar panels, broken shutters rattled in the wind. Inside, among cobweb desks and obsolete equipment, they uncovered boxes of old files, papers yellowing with age. And on one desk, half buried under reports, lay a prototype sleeker than the cracked phone, but with the same strange glow in its circuitry. Oba Oke picked it up with hands that almost trembled. "We tried to build an AI that could predict health crises before they spread," he confessed. "It was meant to save villages from epidemics. But the board killed it. Too costly. Too risky. I buried the project." Zainab touched the cracked phone in her scarf, her fingers trembling. "Then why did this survive? Why me?" His gaze met hers, unflinching. "Because your mother kept it alive. She must have taken it, believing in it long after I stopped. And now it's found its way back, through you." The air between them shifted. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't accident. It was a thread, woven years before either of them understood what it would mean. Zainab felt tears sting her eyes. "All this time, I thought it cursed me. But maybe it was always meant for me." Oba Oke's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I abandoned it. You carried it. That's the difference between us. I ran from tomorrow when it frightened me. You faced it." For the first time, the walls of steel around him cracked. He spoke of Enugu, of nights without food, of a father who vanished, of the vow he made never to be powerless again. She shared her memories of Musa sleeping hungry, of her mother coughing blood while neighbors turned their faces away. Pain met pain, and between them, something fragile grew trust, or the beginning of it. Musa stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. He watched them quietly, reading the tenderness in their voices, the way their eyes lingered. For the first time, He didn't interrupt. He only gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but full of approval. Back in Lagos, storms brewed. Ifeoma had made her final move. With Oba Oke absent from the tower, she swept into the boardroom like a queen long denied her throne. She presented charts, projections, and lies disguised as foresight. She whispered of instability, of a billionaire who had lost his grip, of a girl whose witchcraft held the city hostage. Shareholders shifted. Uneasy. Power wavered. By evening, she had signatures that gave her control. And Lagos itself, bent toward collapse. Rumors spread faster than traffic banks failing, food shortages worsening, fires breaking out where there were none. Fear became its own prophecy, and people believed panic more than truth. That night, in the quiet of the village clinic, the phone buzzed one last time. Zainab held it, her pulse hammering, as the cracked glass glowed steady and clear. This time, there were no storms, no riots, no prices, only a single sentence. Tomorrow, choose love or power. Her breath caught. She looked up, and Oba Oke was watching her, the same words reflected in his eyes. For once, he did not try to interpret, did not try to own the headline. He only asked the question quietly, his voice stripped bare. Which future do we claim, Zainab? The night held its breath as she stared into his eyes, the phone burning between her palms, knowing tomorrow had narrowed into a single choice, and whichever path she chose would shatter the other forever. The rooftop was waiting for them, as if destiny had circled back to the very place where the first confrontation began. 36 stories above Lagos, the city stretched in every direction, alive with neon and smoke, restless like a body that could not sleep. Traffic lights blinked like veins, horns echoed like pulses, and far below, crowds gathered, waiting for something they did not yet understand. Zainab stood at the edge, the cracked phone clutched tight in her hand. The screen glowed faintly, fractured light spilling across her trembling fingers. Every heartbeat reminded her of its final headline. Tomorrow, choose love or power. Behind her, Oba Oke approached, his footsteps heavy, his voice stripped of its usual steel. Zainab, he said softly, the board is gone. The empire is fractured. Lagos burns with lies. That phone, it is the last key I have left, but it is also killing us, both. She turned, tears streaking her cheeks, the city lights reflecting in her almond eyes. If I give it to you, tomorrow belongs to you alone. If I keep it, the world will never stop hunting me. Either way, it destroys us. He shook his head, stepping closer, his broad frame catching the rooftop lights. No, there is another choice. Destroy it. End the curse. Choose love, Zainab, not power. Choose today, not tomorrow. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the phone pulsed in her palm, seductive in its promise. All her life, poverty had bent her spine. Hunger had stolen her voice. The phone had given her dignity, respect, even reverence. To let it go felt like cutting away her own name. The rooftop door burst open with a clang. Ifeoma strode out, her heels sharp against the concrete, her ivory suit immaculate despite the chaos below. Behind her, mercenaries fanned out, rifles gleaming under the floodlights. Her pearl earrings caught the glow as she smiled cruelly. So this is it, Ifeoma said, her voice smooth, mocking. The street girl and the king, standing on ashes. Hand over the phone, Zainab. You can't hold tomorrow. You never could. You were born with dust in your pockets, and dust is where you'll end. Her words cut deep, but Zainab's spine straightened. She had heard worse insults from hunger itself. She raised the phone high, her voice ringing out across the rooftop. Maybe tomorrow isn't mine to own, but it isn't yours either. Ifeoma's smile faltered, rage flashing in her eyes. Don't you dare. The phone buzzed one last time, the cracks glowing like veins of fire. Zainab closed her eyes, whispered a silent prayer to the mother who had first carried it, and hurled it over the ledge. Time slowed as the device spun through the night air, tumbling end over end. The city lights caught its shattered glass, scattering fragments of glow like dying stars. Then, with a final flash, it struck the concrete below and exploded into silence. The effect was immediate. Screens across Lagos that had been choking with false headlines went blank, then rebooted with truth. Rumors evaporated, misinformation collapsed like a tent in wind. Crowds below gasped, then erupted into cheers as clarity returned. The girl who saw tomorrow had destroyed it, giving them back their present. Ifeoma's mercenaries hesitated, their orders unraveling with the phone's shatter. She shouted, cursed. But the moment was gone. Her power had depended on prophecy's shadow, and now there was none. She turned and fled into the stairwell, her footsteps echoing like defeat. Oba Oke stood frozen, watching billions of naira burn away in the silence after the crash. His empire had been built on foresight, on control, on tomorrow. Now, it was gone. Yet for the first time, his face softened not with loss, but with release. He exhaled a breath he had been holding for decades, shoulders loosening as if chains had fallen. Zainab's chest rose and fell, her heart hammering, tears blurring her vision. She had thrown away her lifeline, her shield, her miracle, but in the emptiness left behind she felt something new, freedom. She was no longer a girl bound to headlines written before she could live them. She was only herself, raw, fragile, and alive. Dawn cracked over Lagos, the first golden light spilling across the horizon. Oba Oke stepped to her side, his eyes no longer steel but human, weary and tender. Musa ran to them, pressing his thin arms around both, his voice choked with relief. Oba Oke's gaze lingered on Zainab. He touched her face gently, thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "You've given me ruin," he said softly. "And in that ruin, you've given me peace." Her lips trembled, then curved into the smallest, truest smile she had ever worn. "And you've given me love, when all I wanted was survival." They embraced, the city roaring below them, dawn blazing above them. In the wreckage of power, in the silence of prophecy, they chose each other. As the sun rose higher, Oba Oke bent close, his breath warm against her ear. His words carried the weight of endings and beginnings, the fragile beauty of freedom reclaimed. "Now," he whispered, "we write our own future." For the first time, tomorrow did not own them. They owned today. What would you have chosen, love or power? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited to read your answers.